Good morning, everyone.
Morning, Phil. Morning, Carly.
Hello, hello.
Ah, let's see. We need a couple of minutes.
Sounds
People show
great.
up. How's everybody doing? Cold January morning. At least it's cold up in Utah.
We are
Okay, how are
seeing a
you?
heat wave here in Southern California.
Good for you. It's 20 degrees right now in London.
You know,
That is chilly.
last night, Sam, I was out on a walk at, I don't know, 4 or 5 o'clock, and I thought it must be somewhere around 20 degrees. And the thermometer in my car said it was 40, and I could not believe it. That just doesn't seem even remotely possible. It was really quite cold. My face was getting, kind of getting numb
Yeah.
and whatever. It didn't seem like either I'm getting old or 40 degrees is not 40 degrees. I don't know.
Well, it was 40 degree. It will get up to a high of 43 today. That's what it's saying. But the low, which is the sun hasn't come up yet, so it's
Yeah.
still around 20. So if the sun was down, I'd believe that it was much colder than 40 last night.
Yeah.
But yeah, maybe you are getting old. Who knows?
Yeah.
All right. Well, should we get started? It looks like we got
Yes,
people
Carly, we're
pulling.
talking in those temperatures. Yeah, sure. I've got the meeting notes up.
Okay. Um, so so for um those of you who do we have any, I don't think we have anybody visiting for the first time. Actually was hoping we got a new person coming today, but was having trouble joining the Linux Foundation, so maybe they'll show up later in the meeting. Um, just remind everyone that only members of the Trust RIP Foundation who have signed the necessary agreements are permitted to participate beyond an observer role. And it doesn't look like we have any new members. So let's go through the action items. Status of specifications. Any idea? I mean, Carly, you're more familiar with that. Any idea of what's happening with the specs and the steering committee? We don't have anybody from the steering on the call
Um,
today.
yes. So, at last I know, Scott, so the Trust over IP needs to come up with a process. We're not here to technically evaluate things because that's what the best of work of the working group is. And we want to move this process as quickly as possible, while still having, some oversight into it. Otherwise, you could just publish the spec and then be done. but and then the oversight that should add value. Scott came up with a series of uh, general features that a good specification would have that has been put together as a checklist, which has been forwarded to the steering committee. I'm especially interested to hear from Carla if she thinks that proposed list of questions is a reasonable thing. It's stuff like, do you have shall and must statements? Are you missing important parts like tables that you're referencing? These kinds of things about a internally consistent and well-formed specification. So as far as I know, that questionnaire has been written, and we're looking for feedback from the steering committee, especially to hear from Carla if that process sounds good, and then we can get through it as quick as possible.
Okay, so it's not likely to happen in the next before the end of the month, or is that
I
likely to happen?
I don't know. Let me write to Carla and and the steering committee in the chat, and let's see if we can try and get that through.
Yeah, the reason I'm asking that is the state of Utah is presenting at the Better Identity Foundation this month on the 28th, and they would really love to
Yeah.
announce that the specs are,
Okay.
past that milestone.
Okay, if you can put that, if somebody can write that little note in the chat with the correct dates, and I will copy that into the steering committee messaging, and then I'll have the right dates and names and stuff like that. That was January 28th, right?
Yeah, January
Yeah.
28th, the Better Identity Coalition meeting. The state of Utah is making a present. Oh no. I thought he said it might be the 25th actually. I'm looking it up. That's what I had in my head. Yes, identity authentication, the road ahead 2026. So it's let's see if I have the oh, I thought Chris Brimwell said he was presenting on the 28th. Oh, there's also an event on the 29th. So they've got multiple events. Oh, that the 25th was 2024. So it's January 29th, Identity and the Road Ahead 2026. So I think he needs it by the 28th so he can get it into his slides.
Yeah, he'll
Okay.
have by the 28th to take out of his slides.
Yeah. So he has to put it in. Yeah. So the deadline is the 28th in order to make it into the meeting on the 29th. I'll post the link in the chat and you can include it in the notes. This is the meeting. Yeah, so the KERI specs to be approved by the 28th. Otherwise, we miss an opportunity for announcing the specifications.
And if that's all about the status of the specifications, the only other topics I culled from the previous meeting notes is the list of future topics. The only other,
Yep.
actually, sorry, is the list
Yeah.
of future topics. So.
Yeah, and then Carly wants to add to the discussion. Discussion on the URN said spec. So let's go through the announcements and reports, and then we'll form the agenda for the rest of the meeting. Any announcements? I have an announcement. The KERI Foundation 5W project is started. We've now got 3 developers that just start. Evan, who's on this call, started last week, and the other 2 are starting this week. That'll be working full time on the 5W project. If you're not familiar with the 5W project, that is one-click KERI with the 5 W's: wallet, witness, watcher, web, and wizard. Basically building out KERI infrastructure so that anybody that wants to use KERI can do a one-click install of the infrastructure needed to use KERI, and then that would enable people who are doing adoption decisions to be able to build stuff using that infrastructure. So the infrastructure should be like a substrate that is just available to people. So we want to mature the tooling for creating KERI infrastructure. Another announcement is remind everybody that the KERI conference is coming up April 21st, that week in Lehi, Utah. You can go to the KERI Foundation website and look for signups and stuff like that, where we've got some speakers lined up. We're working on getting the other speakers lined up. Following that is a one-day KERI SETI technical workshop, which would be hosted by the state of Utah. And so I confirmed with the state of Utah earlier this week that they, or maybe it was late last week, I don't remember, that they'll be, so we're working on the agenda for that as well.
April 21st.
Yeah, and then IAW is the following week. So those of you that are traveling, you can stop in Utah and come to the KERI conference, and then drive through southern Utah, see the arches and stuff. April is a really good time of year to see the parks because it's not as crowded because school's still in session. And on your way down, and then you can drive over to the Bay Area to see IAW. Anyway, I know Hank's doing that, or Hank's family is doing that. I think Hank's flying. Anyway,
Sam, you said the 24th, April 24th is the state of Utah SETI meeting.
Let me look at my calendar. I probably said it wrong.
Yes, that's right.
So it is. Hank just showed up there.
Yep.
Oh, 22. Yeah, it's the week of the April. Yeah, but the conference itself is the 20. The conference itself is April 22 and 23.
The eve of is 21. So we start at 6 o'clock in the evening.
Oh, all right. So we do start on the 21st. That's right. The evening of the 21st is the first part of the conference. That's right.
So we have a meet and
greet on the 21st.
Any other announcements to make? All right.
Hearing none, let's go to reports. Anybody want to report on?
Can I make a report?
Yes, absolutely.
So over the holidays, I had some back and forth with Sam about the specific mechanisms we might want to use or the algorithms we might want to settle on for what we're calling joint issuance. And I wrote an update to the dossier spec to describe what we kind of thought might be the best idea for that. I had that update sitting in the dossier spec for a week or two, but yesterday and the day before yesterday, I was trying to get some other stuff done on the dossier spec. Specifically, I wanted to upgrade to use spec up T instead of spec up. And I was finding that stacking the PRs was hard. So I did something a little bit unorthodox and merged that PR, even though nobody's really given any useful feedback on it. But I wanted people to know that was just kind of a logistical workaround to trying to do two interesting changes to the spec at the same time. It definitely needs review, and I'd be glad for people to read that section of the spec. So if you go to the dossier specification, which is, it's the same URL as like the AC/DC specification, just swap dossier for AC/DC. You'll see the section now that talks about joint issuance. It's not super detailed yet, but I would be grateful of feedback on that. And I feel
next week is we're having this meeting at this link for the task forces for the dossier spec and DidWebS. For those of you who are really interested, and I guess we'll have quite a bit to discuss next week.
Yeah. The other thing that I put into the spec that's interesting is at the very end, I have a section on use cases, and I keep coming up with more interesting use cases for this. The latest one for joint issuance, I was testing whether joint issuance would work in a scenario where you're trying to collect signatures for a petition. So you set some kind of a threshold and say, I want to have, 1,000 signatures or something like that. You're collecting these signatures. You can't enumerate in advance all the parties that might sign, but you can state in advance a threshold. Anyway, there's other interesting use cases in that section as well. So that would be worth people reading.
Do we want to add the dossier spec into our table of specifications on the main KERI README webpage?
Yeah, that would be good. We have DidWebS there, right? But not the dossier spec.
I'll take that as to. I'll add that.
And is the URN spec there as well?
URN spec is not.
So we should add that one as well.
Okay.
I think, well, we could talk about it next week, but I think but a short note to think about, Daniel, is that the joint issuance is going to be largely driven by use cases. The actual semantics of what a joint issuance is not universal. It is extremely use case specific, at least in my opinion, and that means that the ways that you can do joint issuance are many, and so we have to figure out how to have maybe define a set of operators that support many use cases, but the semantics maybe are defined in the schema or in an ecosystem governance framework for those joint issuance or some combination thereof.
Yeah, I agree with that. The section on joint issuance currently does define it defines three operators actually. One of the wrinkles here is you also inherently, by tackling joint issuance, you bring up the possibility of joint revocation. And joint revocation is not necessarily symmetrical with joint issuance. Like the rules by which you revoke something might not be identical to the rules by which you created it in the first place. So I'm thinking of like, in the United States, Congress can pass a law with a majority, but to override a veto takes a 2/3 majority or something like that. There's asymmetries. So
And there's another asymmetry as you're talking about that. We might want to define separately from revocation something called retraction, because many of the use cases for joint issuance are more like endorsements. And so you might want to be able to retract an endorsement or
that's
correct it,
yeah.
which is different from a group, threshold type structure. It's more of a, do you still support something, and new information has caused you to retract your support, which
Yeah.
is how newspapers do it, right? They
Yeah.
print a retraction when they make a mistake.
Yeah. Okay, I hadn't even thought about that. It's a good point.
All right.
All right.
Sorry. Any other reports? Anybody report on into code bases or other work on any of the code bases of interest, or the did WebS spec?
Yep,
We're gonna have
just the KERI code base. There is one outstanding open point on the did WebS code base that I'll get into. As far as the KERI Pi code base, just a quick report. I have 3 open PRs right now to each of the release branches that we have, 1, 2, 7, 1 through 2 in main, with some delegation fixes. And then the tests that go along with that to sort of prove that the fix works. And one of the important things to note is that I added the delegables escrow processing to KERI.process escrow, which I definitely wanted to ask a question about why that wasn't there before. It seems like that it's valuable to have there, and it allows the immediate Ubiing with the delegate from a delegator after creating it, which is nice to do some test assertions. So I added that in there. I added the doer level tests and a bunch of test fixtures and test doers. So looking forward for reviews on those PRs. And then as far as the did WebS, there we decided that it doesn't make sense to have in the also known as section a default did WebS did. And so we're going to pull that out and just have the did KERI did be a default did. And that's it.
all right. Hank, I show on my calendar that is it okay, yeah, we don't next week is the Marketing Community Advisory meeting for the KERI Foundation. Do we have somebody presenting next week?
Yeah, it's Paul Warren, explains the ex-BRL working group relation to KERI, but he hasn't sent in his proposal yet, so I can't be specific about what he's going to address. But it's Paul Warren of the ex-BRL working group.
Okay. So I thought that'd be worth announcing. Thanks for putting that. Yeah.
And
All right,
most
any
probably
other?
next month we'll have Ed Akehold on February 17. So these are the 2 upcoming marketing and community presentations.
Ed Eichholt.
What are the 2 dates?
That's the 20th of January. That's the upcoming. And then the next one over that is February 17. It's always 4 weeks.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right. Any other reports? All right. Let's do the agenda for the discussion. We have 35 minutes. So the first item on the agenda is Carly wants to talk about the URN SED spec. There's some issues there. She needs help with, guidance with. And then if we haven't, and then I just wanted to put other things on the agenda. What else does anybody have that they want to put on the agenda for the day? We had future topics, presentation registries, sparse local trees, how to use tell registrars and observers for vendor-to-vendor unlinkability, or any of those something that you want to cover today? No, 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 yays or nays?
I think if there's anything that I would add to the list, it would be discussing our upgrade to Caesar 2.0 and sort of what high priority changes for this year would be.
Well, that's probably in the implementers call, but you can put it on the future topics.
Sounds
I'm
good.
guessing.
I'll bring it up in the next implementer call.
I was trying to look for things that are more feature based of what ACDCs and KERI can do in terms of things. So those are three things that are in the spec that haven't. The three things I mentioned are three things in the spec that haven't gotten a lot of attention. So I didn't know if you do people want me to talk a little bit about presentation registers? That's probably the simplest one.
A presentation,
What those?
how do presentation registries relate to registrars and observers?
Presentation registry means that the presenter has a registrar,
That would be what I'd be interested
not the issuer. So you're leveraging registrars, but it's a registrar controlled by the presenter, because a presentation is a type of issuance, and so you can register, but it's more generic because you don't have to have a registry per credential. You just have to have a registry per presenter, and every presenter is a blinded state update. You can leverage the blinded state tell. So it sounds like I should talk about it because there's some open questions about it. So anyway, but that allows the main feature of a presentation registry. It allows a presenter to detect if there are fraudulent presentations of credentials issued to them. And so nobody else does that. Nobody can detect impersonation of the wallet holder. They can only detect impersonation of the issuer of a credential, not the presenter of a credential. So a presentation registry allows that, which closes one of the main security holes in most verifiable credential system designs, including all of the other did methods besides KERI. Anyway.
And is the way that
well, let's talk about that. Okay, let's talk about that. Let's do Carly's stuff first. So we'll talk about it when we get to it at the end. So Carly, floor is yours.
Yes, I need help because I don't know enough about. There was in the chat, I put the links to the URN submission. There's the GitHub on Trust Over IP, which has the original submission. It also has a link to the email chain, which is the thread of the official submission with feedback from the URN committee. There was somebody just before the holidays from them, IETF did a huge breakdown. And honestly, I don't understand parts of it for sure. So I don't have the capabilities to answer those questions. Now, Sam and Wenjing answered some in the chain, but there's been no response from the URN submission. I suspect what needs to happen is that we need to rewrite the official URN submission with the addressing the information of those points that were made, and then resubmit again in that email chain. And then perhaps I think we're pretty close to acceptance of URN said. So that means the work to do is to rework the submission. And I wish I could do it, but I can't.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with that, Carly. I'm going to say, because I read through the chain. When we originally did the submission, we made a decision to simplify the submission to only list the Caesar codes that currently were valid for hashes. And the reviewer rejected that approach. He basically said, we need to see what your future-proof approach is. In other words, they want to see more detail about how we would support in the future the generic idea of hashes. And that means actually explaining a little bit about how how cryptographic agility works in Caesar and how the tables are set up so that people can then, so then the spec would be any of the, instead of here are 5 currently supported codes, and these are the codes, it would be here is how you find the supported codes in the Caesar tables for hashes. And then a URN would URN said would use any of those codes. And so down the road, it wouldn't be revising the URN said spec to update with new codes because the new codes would be derived from the Caesar spec.
Right. So if we want to set up, I can support time spent rewriting that submission, but I can't accurately describe that. It's going to be a game of telephone. So
Okay. Does anybody want to help with that?
because Wenjing was
Rewrite?
doing a great job, and then I can support and type and encouragement and discussion, and we just have to set up a day and spend an hour.
Well, if nobody else wants to help, I'll help. I'll help Carly because I probably know what needs to be done. But
Okay.
basically, if we just look at, I mean, I read through his email, the reviewer's email, and basically he'd like us to reference specifically the Caesar spec and this and the said spec within the Caesar spec, and then how we indicate what are valid hash code Caesar codes for hashes for valid seds. And
Right.
so we
Okay.
just so we have to just so I have to think about how we describe that succinctly, and then try to go from there. But anybody else who wants to help, that would be, now's your chance to stand up and volunteer.
I'd be more than willing to help out.
Okay.
So, Sam, based on your availability, just tell me a time that you want it, and I'll come out and we will write the new submission and then send it in.
When you say come out, you mean like meet on
Sorry.
Zoom?
Yeah, on Zoom.
Okay. Hey, you're coming to Utah? Great.
I think, Sam, you were headed over to
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Probably Friday.
I like Fridays.
Yeah. uh, like let's like Friday late morning looks like free for me right now. So
What time zone are you?
I'm
Okay.
Mountain Time.
Okay. I'm totally free on Friday, so tell me a time, and then I can, if you have Zoom, otherwise I can ask Linux Foundation to set up the
Yeah, I
Zoom.
have a Zoom. So yeah, so like let's say like 11 a.m. Mountain Time on Friday.
Okay.
I'll just put a placeholder here and then I'll just put a Zoom link in it. All right. All right. Um, I think that's it. Okay. Anything else? Um, if not, then we can talk about presentation registries. Let me pull up. Um, I think I have them described in a recent slide
you want me to
deck.
stop sharing?
Yeah, what I I think I shared my. Here we go. All right. All right. So this is a diagram that shows a brief overview of how a presentation registry works. You have an issuee. The issuee is identified in the attribute or aggregate section of an ACDC. So the I field in the little a section or big A sections. When it's a big A section, it's actually inside an attribute block, as opposed to just a field. So we'll just talk about the attribute section because that's simpler, but it maps to the selectively disclosable aggregate section. There is also, for a presentation registry, an RD field in the attribute section. So when there is an RD field in the attribute section and the schema defines that as a presentation registry, then that RD field is points to the issuee's presentation registry. That requires that the issuee have a registrar, and what is registered is a state update for a blinded state tell, blindable state tell. So this is what it looks like. You have the issuee as presenters key event log. You have an issuee presentation registrar observer presentation registry transaction event log. So you have an incept, and in a blindable state tell, the incept is vacuous. The inception event doesn't link to anything. This is so that this is privacy preserving. When you create an inception, it's just a generic registry. It only becomes linked to an ACDC or some other issuance with an update event, because only the update event has a link to a blindable block that includes a SED of the issuance. So at some point when the issuee makes a presentation, they create an update event with a whatever state you want to define. I'm suggesting like a presented state, and the blindable state tell, the blindable block will point to the ACDC being presented, or the SED of the exchange being presented. So we need to decide which one is most usable. By virtue of pointing to the ACDC, it's basically saying this ACDC issue to this issuee was presented, but it doesn't have any other identifying information. Although it does could have date or something else. If it's the exchange message, then it would have a date timestamp in it. So that is a stronger binding to the presentation itself. Every time you do a presentation of an ACDC, you can create a new entry in your presentation registry. And a presentation registry you only need one presentation registry for all presentations across all ACDCs that are issued to the issuee. Because they're blindable, once you do a presentation and then you do a no change update, you can't tell what the current state of the registry is. And then when you do a new presentation, you create a new update for that presentation. So a verifier, when they go to verify the presentation, given that the schema defines that this is that ACDC must be bound to a presentation registry to be valid, will then not just verify the the registry of the issuer, and it's linked back to the issuer's KEL, but will also verify the presentation linked back to the issuee's KEL. So now you can detect that means that prevents somebody from presenting a verifiable presentation unless they can anchor the presentation in the KEL of the issuee, which means the issuee can detect that anchoring event, and therefore know that their keys have been compromised, their signing keys for making the presentation. I think the text just says what I just said. Yes. Okay. So any questions?
Yes, I have two.
Okay.
The first one is, I assume this allows for a Merkle tree of presentations to be anchored in the TEL event?
Yes, because the blindable state TEL event, that block has a SED in it.
And that said could be the Merkle tree root.
Could be the
Yeah.
Merkle tree root, right?
Okay, so then that leads to my second question, and this is more broad on the concept of anchoring via Merkle tree, and the trade-off between ephemeral presentations or ephemeral exchanges in one way or another, and anchoring them. It would seem to me that there is a relationship there between the amount of time someone should trust an ephemeral presentation in this case, versus the time it takes to anchor it. And is there any way we could create a relationship between those two times? So in other words, it's going to take me, like, I don't anchor until I send 10,000 messages or something like that. And that means that there's a certain amount of lag between a presentation being anchored. So the ephemeral window for that signature is that amount of time. Does that make sense? I didn't mean to choke you up. Sorry.
No. I'm still recovering from a very long recovery. Yes. So a presentation that is not anchored, right, has two properties. One, it is only valid if the key state used to sign the presentation hasn't changed in the time frame that you're verifying the presentation.
Oh, then we're covered. That's perfect. Okay.
Right. Yeah. The problem is that a verifier needs to know whether or not it should require the anchor in order for the verification to proceed.
Yeah.
So I believe the way to address that would be to define in either the schema or ecosystem governance framework for the AC/DC that you would like to have a dual mode verification, where you say verifiers may choose to accept a presentation if the presentation is signed but not yet anchored, when the time frame for the signed but not yet anchored is some time that you define. Otherwise, it may require, before it accepts, that the anchor appear. So you'd have three cases. They can choose not to worry about the anchor, even though it designates that an anchor should happen, which means that the presenter has no guarantee that those verifiers aren't accepting impersonations, right? Or that it will accept temporarily a presentation, but then will follow up with expecting that within a certain time frame that the anchor will have occurred, and therefore they will reject the early presentation. So the question really comes down to the use case. In what use case would you accept a presentation? What are you going to do with it? When later you find out that it didn't ever get anchored, then you would have to assume that it was fraudulent, but you accepted it for a period of time.
Yes.
And so you expose both the presenter and the verifier to a window of risk. And in certain applications that might be perfectly acceptable. In other applications, it would not be. So the question is really it's really a cooperation between the presenter and the verifier. The presenter's making certain assumptions and the verifier is making certain assumptions. So that really comes down to a governance issue of how you would clarify that. Now, I think I know why you're asking that question, but you know,
no, it's interesting because it seems that this is, you'll understand why I'm asking it even more when I say that this, like it relates to using a presentation for an authentication, and then if you relate that to like other types of authentication frameworks that have like the concept of a refresh token or something like that, you wouldn't accept the refresh unless the previous authentication was anchored, I think, or the previous presentation was anchored.
yeah.
That's kind of where my head was going with that.
Yeah, so it's an in-between security policy. So the
I mean, to
way
account for the
the
fact
way
that
this is
anchoring
the way this is proposed is for like wallet users for like SETI that want to know if their credentials have been compromised and somebody else has stolen their keys and now they can present their credentials on their behalf and they can't detect it and there's no way for them to recover from to know that they need to rotate the keys to recover, right? Where you're talking about a different use case.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. That's cool. But I mean, the use cases, they will converge, I think.
Yeah, and like everything in the verifiable credential world, um, the use case and the ecosystem governance framework and the schema all are ways to express semantics that we don't necessarily want to push down to the security layer.
Yeah.
Because then the security layer gets really complicated, and now and so
And
presentation.
you're using those, the ecosystem governance framework and the schema, to be upfront, I guess, about the security trade-offs, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's how people know what they're doing.
Right.
So
You're not putting something out there to say, hey, this is totally secure. You're putting it out there saying this is secure up to these bounds, and you need to understand these bounds if you want to participate in this ecosystem.
yeah. So for example, for a SETI credential, that's a state endorsement of an entitlement for a citizen. The citizen like is doing a proof of age to log on to, say, a social media website. The ecosystem governance framework and even state regulation law would say that verifiers must see the presentation anchored in the presentation registry before allowing the individual to log in. The time delay to do that registration is trivial relative to the time frame of a user interacting with the website, so it's not a problem. In your case, where you might be bulk presenting thousands of credentials, that time delay might be problematic. That's why you're batching them with a Merkle tree. So those are completely different applications in terms of the latency of doing the anchor. Yeah. So I'm saying that because I'm talking to Phil, but I want everybody to understand what the differences are in the application.
Awesome. Thank you.
So any questions? I think so. Do you want me to?
Yes,
I can unshare my screen or just leave the screen up there, whatever you'd like.
So what's the concept of a registrar and how is it different from a registry?
Okay, a registry is a data structure. A registrar is a service. So you'd have a registrar service endpoint that you would UBI that would say, this is where you go find my registries. So an issuer like Glyph currently has a registrar, which is a service endpoint that they currently double up with their witnesses. I believe the witnesses provide registrar services. Is that right? If you want to go check the TEL, the revocation registry, right? Then you have an API that endpoint that somebody can go check. So to genericize it, a registrar is a component, an infrastructure component in KERI. And so anybody that is doing anchored issuances and wants somebody to, and those anchored issuances have state, and they want to maintain that state, then they need a TEL, a transaction event log, which we're also calling a registry, because revocation registry is the common term for that. So there's lots of different ways to do transaction event logs, but a registry is a synonym for a transaction event log data structure. And then registrar is the thing that serves up transaction event logs or registries.
Okay, so an issuee as a controller would create a presentation registry and then host it in a registrar.
In a registrar of their choosing.
Got it.
So that means that for example, a wallet provider who wants to provide to their clients who are downloading and installing their wallet application may choose to provide as part of their service not just witness and watcher services for that wallet user, but registrar services.
And
so
to answer your question, Sam, yes, the life witnesses do serve that purpose.
Yeah, that's what I assumed. So one of the things that we did as a shortcut to get Glyph to production back in the day, this is now 4 years ago, is that the witness host, the URL, the IP address where a witness exists that's running the witness, doubled up to provide all of the services that people might need, including registrar services. So when we talk about witnesses, we say, oh, the witness serves up KELs, it also serves up TELs, right? And that was not that was a shortcut. So
yeah, we jammed everything we could into those witnesses. They'll give you the TELs, the KELs. They'll do your mailbox. They'll get you a cup of coffee. They book Carlos flights for her when she travels overseas. They do a lot.
Yeah, but going forward, and this is actually one of the main things that we'll be working on with the 5Ws, is we need to separate out formally the definitions of those services as infrastructure components that are then served up by infrastructure service companies that provide those, so that anybody that is a holder of a KERI AID and has a wallet can choose who their service provider is for witness, watcher, registrar, and observer. Now, we haven't talked about observers, but you see observers on the thing. Think of an observer, if registrars are to witnesses as observers are to watchers, right? So the verifier in this interaction will have an observer that is observing the registrar of the issuee. And when the verifier goes to verify, they ask their observer, is the presented event in the registry for this issuee, have you seen it, observer? And has it been and if they has, this is okay, we've seen it, so now we verified that it was anchored in the KEL. Now we need to see if we need to link it now to the presented ACDC, and so the presentation would include the blinding factor, so that the verifier can unblind the blindable state and verify that the ACDC is the ACDC. And once they do that, then they can say, yes, we verified that presentation. The issuee then then afterwards, after the presentation is executed and the transaction is completed, or the transaction is completed, then they would issue an update no change event to their registry, so that now nobody can verify the current presentation, so they can't reuse it. And if somebody were to steal the presentation, let's say they were able to hack into the presentation and decrypt all of the communications, so they had the blind, they couldn't take that presentation and replay it because it's no longer valid, because it's not the latest event in the issuee's presentation registry anymore. So the time frame under which they could do a replay attack if they captured the presentation itself is solely determined by the issuee. The minute the second or the instant that they issue an update event that is vacuous, and you can't tell that it's vacuous because they're blinded, terminates the time frame during which a verifier can verify that it's the latest presentation. Now, they can always verify that at the time that they verified it was a presentation, because they can go back into the KEL and see that it's there. I mean, go back in the registry TEL and see that it's there. But they can't. But a replay attack won't work. So somebody can't replay it someplace else. So it's the first time that you verify, it has to be the latest event. Any other verifications, you're auditing a prior verification. Does that make sense? And what time are we at? Oh, we got 3 minutes.
Yeah, one topic I'd like to talk about, and I don't know if it's covered in the specification on where you talk about registrars and observers, and now I guess witnesses as well, is the API that we choose for them. And so with witnesses, we explicitly relied on the query response messages, which are asynchronous, require a place to send the response to, which up the level of difficulty. And I'm wondering if we have specified like a simple HTTP API for these.
We have not. That is part of the community work to define that.
Okay.
So
good. Because that would just simplify some things. Because recording, like, to send a query message, you need to sign it, and so then now the witness or the registrar that is receiving that needs to be able to verify the signature on the query message, which means they need to know the key state of the person making the query. So you have a whole dance there required to bootstrap that process, which is just wondering if we can make that a little simpler, especially for things that are supposed to be public anyway, or can be.
Well, certainly for, I mean, everybody that provides a service has to address the problem of DDoS attacks.
Mm-hmm.
So the query reply solves the DDoS problem, because you can whitelist who can query because they have to sign it, right? It's just not anybody can come overload you with queries. So you either have to have a load balanced infrastructure where you are doing gray listing of queryers, or you have an explicit signed query reply so that you can whitelist queryers. So one is more friction, but essentially locks down your infrastructure. You don't have to have a load balanced infrastructure to solve it. The other one is not locked down, and therefore you have to, have like a Cloudflare load balancer in front of you where they do their load balance, gray listing load balancing magic, where if a single source is sending lots of queries for information, that they attenuate the bandwidth that is available to them, right? So it's friction either way. But
it's who has to withstand the friction, I guess.
Yeah, who has to withstand the friction? So.
Yeah.
So I don't.
It probably makes sense, as with all things that we discuss. It probably makes sense to make define both, and then let the implementers
let the implementers decide. Somebody who's providing services, they get to decide where they want the friction. Do they want to impose the friction on their users so that they don't have to build a resilient infrastructure, load balance infrastructure, or do they want to lower friction on their users, but then they carry the cost of,
they carry the burden.
Yeah, and then if they happen to sign up for Akamai or Cloudflare as their load balance CDN, and somebody at that organization, IT person, pushes out a config file that has an error in it, and it brings down their whole infrastructure for a couple of days. That they understand that they're susceptible to that single point of failure. I'm saying this because that's what Cloudflare did a month ago. I don't know if you know, the whole internet went down for a day because an IT person at Cloudflare pushed a config file to their infrastructure, which was disseminated across all of Cloudflare, and all of their configs went down because the config file had an error in it, and so it failed config, and so none of their infrastructure would run, and it would fail, and then it would reboot back to a previous version of the config file, come up for a few minutes, and then go back down again because the new config file was in the queue to be updated. So it kept trying to update itself, fail, revert back, run for a little bit, and then try to do the update. It took them a few hours to figure out that was the problem, and then remove the offending config file.
When you can do things at scale, you can screw up at scale too.
So
I got to drop. So the only to do that I have is for me to add the dossier and URN specifications to the thing.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
I hope
everyone.
that was helpful. All right. Bye-bye.